Well, like many of you, our team has been asking itself, how can we help in these difficult times, for which we know for our clients and for the graduates of our program. And our first instinct, the first thing that we thought might be helpful, was to reach out to you with a reminder of some important principles and concepts that seem particularly relevant given the new circumstance, the new work environment and home environment that we're all facing. We thought that the principles of managing stress and worry and fear would be the place to start. So, if you'll remember from the class, my name is Steve Garland. You know that if you're watching this, we're sending this to our clients and to the people who have participated in our training over the last 4 or 5 years or so. And I taught many of you, but you also might know my partners, Bill Sadi, Mike Rutledge. We're the ownership group here in Central Illinois, and our team thinks that it's time to reach out to you and remind you of a few things that we talked about in all of our training programs. So, Mr. Carnegie wrote 30 principles that help people manage stress, worry, and fear. But if you'll remember, there are a couple things we need to realize about stress, worry, and fear that make these principles come alive. A couple premises, if you will. So the first premise is this: two people can be in exactly the same circumstance at exactly the same time. One can be stressed, worried, and fearful, and the other is not as much. Just think about that for a moment. Two people in exactly the same circumstance at exactly the same time. One is very stressed and fearful. The other seems to be at peace and managing things very well. If you buy that premise, here's what that means. That fear and stress and worry are less about the actual circumstance that we find ourselves in, and much more about how we're thinking about it, our interpretation, our perception of the circumstance that we find ourselves in. The second idea around stress and worry and fear that I think is relevant before we dive into the principles is that we as individuals will experience stress, worry, and fear when we perceive or think about a threat to something that we value. That's why the first premise works. In other words, if you have two people, same circumstance, one stressed, one not, one fearful, one not, the person who's fearful is perceiving a threat to something that they place value on. Person not so much is either not perceiving the threat, or whatever's being threatened, they don't value it in the same way as the other person. So these two concepts they capture the individual nature of fear, of stress and worry. And Mr. Carnegie did a beautiful job of writing 30 principles that help us think about our circumstance, interpret where we are, and and they challenge us to ask ourselves some fundamental questions that help us think differently. Because in the end, that's what we're trying to do. In the end, we're trying to interpret and perceive the circumstance and think about it in a way that causes us less anxiety and less fear. For example, Mr. Carnegie challenged us to count our blessings instead of our troubles. This helps us capture a mindset of appreciation. I understand that in this time, it almost doesn't seem like the right thing to do to focus on what's going right and well in the world. But the art of gratitude, the art of appreciation, just taking a few minutes and allowing our mind to appreciate what we have, our families, the extra time some of us have with them, rather than focusing on the loss or the threat of our finances or our businesses, things along those lines, but that we give ourselves just a few moments in time to count our blessings, to think appreciatively, to give gratitude. I would challenge each of us to to find 5 minutes in our day to write down 2, 3, 5 things that you're grateful for that day. 5 things that went well. 5 things that you appreciate and that you would count as a blessing. It helps balance our fear. It helps balance these thoughtful or these stressful thoughts that we're feeling. Mr. Carnegie also said that we should ask ourselves, what's the worst that can happen? And then prepare to accept the worst and to improve upon the worst. That's a scary question, right? What's the worst that can happen? You see, stress, worry, and fear, they live in our imagination. It's how we think. Our imagination is a powerful tool. It can create music and poetry and architecture and just beautiful things in the world. And our imagination can create for us, if we allow it, a living hell on earth. We have to ask ourselves, what is really the worst thing that can happen? This allows us to capture a mindset of acceptance. It's important that we ask ourselves, let our imagination work. What's the worst thing that can happen? Be mindful of this. I mean, just think about what's the end here, right? What's the final worst thing? If we can accept that, it frees us then. It frees us to do the third thing, which is the most important thing, and that's try to improve on the worst. What can you do today? First, we have to accept it. When we accept things as they are, it frees us to get into action, to get out of our imagination, to get more into our rational mind, and to take the steps that are necessary to avoid that worst case scenario. Mr. Carnegie asked us to think about living in day-tight compartments. This is the mindset of simplification. It's a powerful mindset in times of trouble. We live in he said, live in day-tight compartments. Sometimes we just have to focus on today. Our imagination is 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead, what's going to happen if and what's going to happen when. But today is the thing that we need to focus on. What can we do today to help us navigate the trouble that we find ourselves in? Break it down by hour, focus, simplify, prioritize, delegate. Think of what are the now moments that we can be helpful, that we can be productive. What can we do in the moment? And when we get into action, keep busy is another one of Mr. Carnegie's principles. When we get out of our head and start doing, then it tends to lessen our fear, our stress, and our worry. So live in day-tight compartments. Focus on the now. Focus on it hour by hour, right? When you're working, work. When you're with the kids, be with the kids. Be where you are 100% of the time. Limit your ability to, limit your need to anticipate and to think to the future too far in advance. Today, take care of today, and tomorrow you'll be in good shape for tomorrow. Mr. Carnegie said to get all the facts. This is I think one of the more challenging things when we manage stress, worry, and fear. This is the mindset of knowing, right? Of figuring stuff out, of being more informed. The challenge of knowing is that we live in a world that we have access to an amazing amount of information. That's fantastic and good in many ways, but it's also challenging in some ways, because we're not quite sure who to trust. We're not, we get mixed signals. You can read one article and it says this, you read a different article, it says that. Who do you trust? Well, I think when I ask myself that question, when I'm in the process of knowing, when I'm in the process of getting facts, especially facts from people I don't know personally, I try to ask myself a couple of questions. I ask myself, is the person sharing the information, are they authentic? In other words, are they being manipulative? Are they trying to move me in one way or another? But does this seem like an authentic sharing of factual information? If it does, then the second thing I ask is, does it make logical sense? Does it fit with the facts that I see and observe and know intuitively, my experience? Does it work logically? If they seem authentic and they seem logical in the way that they're approaching things, The last kind of criteria of trust is, are they empathetic? Can they relate to me? Are they sharing this information because they have some sense about who I am and where I am in this world, you know, in these circumstances, and can they relate in some way, shape, or form? So yes, get all the facts. Once you have all the facts, make a decision. Once you make a decision, act. In this world, I think, in today's world particularly, the facts are changing. You know, what they knew last Wednesday isn't what they know this Wednesday. And so decisions we made last Wednesday may not be the decisions we need to make this Wednesday, based on an ever-changing, evolving set of facts. Get all the facts, simplify, right? Practice the mindset of knowing. The people who are the most informed, who know, limit their fear and anxiety because they've made a decision and they act. And if we are working in a team, like our team here at Dale Carnegie, we need to act together, buy in, pull on the rope, all of us together. Finally, Mr. Carnegie said that one way to manage stress and worry and fear effectively is to create happiness in others, to be of service, to be useful. Stress and worry and fear is one of our most inward emotions. It causes us to think a lot about ourselves and to be self-aware and self-interested. It's a heightened level of self-awareness and self-interest. The perfect balancing response is to force ourselves to be more outward, to look around, to your neighbors, to your teammates, to other businesses, and be helpful. That's the motivation of this post, is that we're in an uncertain time. We certainly are feeling some anxiousness and fear and worry in our own lives, and we challenged ourselves to just be helpful, to find a way to be less inward and more outward. If we all do that, I think it's a very reasonable premise to think that, or a reasonable conclusion to think that we could make things a little better for each other. The more inward we are, the more challenging it is for us to tackle a problem as a group. So this is definitely a group solution that we're going to need to come up with. We have many people in the world working on it. And what can we do in our small way to just make it easier for people to be helpful, to be kind, to be accepting. So those are the five mindsets. The alternative mindsets to stressful thoughts is to be appreciative, to practice the mindset of acceptance, to simplify, to just focus on the now, on the day type compartments, to simplify what we need and to simplify a very complicated thing. We get distracted with the complex, right? So one step at a time. The mindset of knowing, be informed, and the mindset of service, looking and helping other people. So we're here for you. Remember that we have this little golden book here that each of you got in each of your training sessions. This booklet contains the 30 principles. We only went through 5 or 6 of them today. But you can email us. We have an electronic copy of this. We could be happy to send that to whoever, a friend, a relative, whoever the case may be, who you think might benefit. We're here. The phones are on. The email is working. If you have questions, things that we can help you and your team with, we definitely have virtual capabilities, and we want obviously to see you in person, because that's what we are here in Dale Carnegie. But we certainly understand the need to reach out virtually and connect that way, and we certainly can. Thank you so much, and we look forward to posting our next helpful video, we hope. Talk to you soon.